But yeah, rust never sleeps, and it certainly does not. It's the rust police. Can you hear them? There we go. They're all like that, sir, as they would say in the motor trade. Right, so we've got the spider on the rotisserie, so that I can get to bits and pieces that we couldn't do before. Deconstructing stuff as we go. I've got the seals off and so on. Really, so when we go for paint removal, which I think I'm going to use blasting, soda blasting, which I normally use anyway, but there's some cavities I'd like to be able to get into, so I'm removing some bits to enable that. So that's what we're doing. So up on the rotisserie, I've got access to it. Now, when it comes to actually working on it, some of it can be done on here, but not all of it, because I like to, you know, we've got to keep it all straight whilst we're doing it. So yeah, so that's it. So at the minute I'm working on this area, we'll take that off and we'll see what we've got under there. We knew that was the problem area. Do you remember with the when we take the engine out, we had all the issues in there, so we can see a bit more what goes on in there in a minute. So that's that bit. This one didn't look too bad, but we'll have a closer look at that in a minute. And then we've got some floor repairs in here, you know, which we sort of knew about. You could see them from inside. And the rest of it isn't too bad. So yeah, we'll have a closer look at some of it in a minute, but for now I think we should get on with get that out, see what we got. I reckon that's a good idea. So I've been drilling the spot welds out. Now I'll use a little chisel to lift it up, and then we can have a proper look. Now, first thing was, do you remember this? It had this plate over it, didn't it? That had been let in there. So that had some MIG blobs holding it on. So I've unpeeled that and taken that off, which revealed the rust underneath, which is why they'd put it on there, obviously. It was a bit tricky, wasn't it? Because they'd let it in round the cross member there, and you couldn't really see it being done. So it was a little cheeky, really, but you know, it was all right. But yeah, that's what's under it, which is, you know, to be expected, really. So we'll unpeel that, take that off, and then we can see the inside of that box section, what we've got, and that can then be cleaned when they're doing the blasting, and then it can all be rebuilt accordingly. So, right, let's get me goggles and bits and pieces, and we'll do that. Right, so we can see the sort of horrors that are abound under here. So yeah, so here we are. So this is what we talked about before, where the you know, where it's bolted through, where the cross member went in. So that's where the bolts come up through. And this area here should be reinforced with the captive nuts. And you can see there's not a lot left of it other than just bits of rust, really. So this is the sort of thing you get, you know, this is just rust. It's all just disintegrated. there's previous repairs in here, plated over here, and they've tried to get some paint in here when they did it to try and stop it getting much worse. But you can see how it sort of sweats up on here, where you get the two pieces of metal together. So if we go along to this bit, you see this is for the anti-roll bar mounts. And you remember I said that one wouldn't come undone, so I ground the head off because the head was already damaged. There's effectively a good one, but you can see what's happened here. This is all corroded away, and where it's sort of dimpled down like that, that's where it's had rust expanding between them, between this outer piece here and there. So you can see it's actually ended up rusting that out and rusting that out. You can see that's dented in accordingly with that. So that would have sort of, effectively that would have had something like that sitting between it where it festered up and expanded and pushed it out. So yeah, so we're going to have to make a new one of these reinforcing pieces, and then they're going to have to make the corresponding bit for here, which is something very much like that. And then here's the tail of the chassis where it joins in, and that's your mounting points for your steering idler. And you can see the end of this is all rusted away. So when they construct these, this bit goes onto there, and then it's all welded together. So you've drilled spot welds out along the edges, and then also they also get some spot welds in here, and then you run a seam across there. That's how they make it. But you can see this is all gone. So quite what I'm going to do with that, I don't know at the minute. I'll have to sort something out with that. I'll make my mind up once it's all cleaned up how I actually tackle that. But a lot of this outside edge here is coming off anyway because of all this damage, and it's all been plated up round here. So it might be that I make this whole lower section up, because this is one piece that goes across and joins onto there. And so I might make that side up, and then I might do something similar here. So I'm probably going to deconstruct a lot of this and do a lot of work in this area. And once I've got this uncovered, I can rebuild the end of this, the foot of this chassis or the tail or whatever it is. So yeah, that's this is why I'm trying to deconstruct it like this, so that we can get into these areas. Now, people say, oh, what about acid dipping? Well, yeah, you could acid dip this and it will get in here and eat all the rust away, but it's just still going to be in there festering away. I've got to physically remove it from here. So we got a lot of work on this chassis rail. The opposite one is a lot better, but this might still need some of this sort of work. So I've got to make my mind up whether I do the same here, drill all these little spot welds out and take this skin off so that we can get in there and clean it up. Now, having found what I've found on the other one, I suspect that's what I'm going to do. You can see there's sort of rust build up in here, and this is where the cross member bolted on, and between the cross member and this, it's rusted, festered away. The fact these undone means that they're still attached internally, which means it's still strong. So I don't think we've got the same rust issues in here, but I'm tempted to unpeel this, and then they can get in there and blast it all, clean it all up when they do the other, the rest of it, and then we can then rebuild accordingly. So that's the plan. But yeah, this is what we got. So it is, it's not good, is it? Rust never sleeps, as Neil Young would say. Although he's not allowed to say much at the minute because of Spotify, but there we go. If you don't know what I'm talking about, Google it. But yeah, rust never sleeps, and it certainly does not. There we are. That's it. Well, plenty to do. It's the rust police. Can you hear them? There we go. Right, so deconstructing this, as I said, so we can gain access to the various cavities to get them cleaned up. So I just thought we'd talk through them. So last time we saw this on the car, this is the boxing plate, which has been replaced with nice heavy gauge galvanised. So it's nice and strong, but yeah, it's only these tiny little welds along the edge here. Although they were strong enough, they tore this piece out when it's coming out, but this all needs making new anyway. So that's the original FIAT panel. That's what they lit in. So that one's that side. So I did that. To gain access to that, we had to get the outer sill off first, which again is something they fabricated up. Remember, these were the wrong shape. And again, it's another piece of galvanised steel, so quite nice, but although, to be honest, welding galvanised is a bit dangerous actually. It's very, very noxious, the gas that comes off it. So I hope they're all right. Didn't give themselves some dreadful lung condition. But yeah, and then again, you see here, and it's all been sprayed up with wax oil in it. So attempts have been made to protect this car and keep it safe, even after these repairs, which, as I said, they have lasted quite well. But that's the seal from the other side, so that had to come off. Now the funny thing here is that feels like it's, no, I think it's just that's got a fold in it. I was going to say that's thinner gauge, but I think it's just flexing because it hasn't got the top fold in it. Right, so I'll stop talking about that. So then I got to the other side, and so I took the other sill off, which was this side of the car. So much the same. We got what we thought was the boxing plate. They made a new boxing plate. So I got that off, only to find another one. So they've done two, but this is very thin. So I think what's happened here is I think that they let this one in, and then realised it's so thin that it's really not, it's not much use. So I think they thought, well, actually, that we can do better than that. And that's when they went up to the heavier gauge. So it's quite funny, that one was in there, then that one. And to illustrate what that should look like, in true Blue Peter fashion, here's one I made earlier. So yeah, so that's what that should look like. So that's yeah, so that's what you should have in there. So it should look more like that. So it has this return on the top here, and then we've got the lightening holes which are then swaged for strength, so it becomes strong. So yeah, that's what we should have, one like that. That's one I fabricated a long time ago for another car, but I'll be making new for this. But anyway, that's by the by. But yeah, that's what you should be seeing in there. Not that, but there we are. It's and we will. That's what you will see, because that's what it'll have. So yeah, that's that bit for now. That'll do. Yeah. So all that's for the scrap bin. anyway, here we go. Right. And another thing we was going to look at. Oh, if I don't trip over. Another thing of note is on these, you get an issue where the back axle mounts. Now this is particularly on the 2.4s. It doesn't matter about 2 litres, don't do this. And coupes don't seem to give so much trouble here. But this is a thing to do with the 2.4 Spider. So yeah, so if you remember, these have an independent rear suspension setup, which was effectively borrowed from the FIAT 130 range. They were never designed with this axle in, when they were originally designed. There was talk that they were supposed to have this type of more sophisticated back end on them, and then they ended up with something that was more derived of the 125 range on cart springs, but it's actually a very elaborate setup. It's more than just putting a beam axle on cart springs. It's got a sort of 4-link design to it. They're very good. They're good. They're a good setup. And the FIAT 130 it's another good setup. But what happens is that the training arms come up into here and they mount on here, so all your stresses of everything around the back axle ends up transmitted into this piece here, where it bolts through the floor, and then it cracks through here. So you get cracks in there, and then that can get a lot worse on the top and you see here it's starting to crack there as well. So this is an issue. Now what I'll do is I'll weld the cracks up, and I'll grind them down, and then I normally put a strengthening plate over this area so it can't do it again. But when it gets really bad, it has a piece above it, which we'll film in a minute to illustrate that, and even that can break away and it can get really bad, so to the point where it can really upset the handling. Many years ago I was looking after a Spider for a guy, and it came via another Dino man who was really lovely chap, who was extremely good with these cars. Sadly, he's passed away. A lovely chap called Phil. Those that know will know who I'm talking about. But yeah, he was really very involved with these and Ferraris and so on. And when we had to pick this car up from him because it changed hands, and you know, the new owner was asking me to do some work on it, some rust repair work. And when I picked it up, Phil said to me, he said, "Oh, you know, I just want to let you know, Mark, that this car doesn't drive that well. It's got issues with how it performs. You know, you hit a bump and it seems to get quite unsettled." He said, "You know, we put a steering box in it, that helped, and we've done various things to it which have helped, but we haven't quite got to the bottom of it. But I'm really telling you so that you know it's not sort of something I'm not aware of. You know, I do know we've got an issue with this car, but obviously any chance of developing and trying to work out what it is finished because the guy sold it. So, you know, we never did get to the bottom of it. So it's sort of passed the baton on to you to sort out." And anyway, this car was having, you know, I just sort of drove it. It drove okay. I thought, well, I don't know. It's, you know, I'm not going to worry too much about this. We had so much else to do on it, on the car, which was mainly corrosion type stuff. And once I was doing that, once we started uncovering it and stripping stuff down, that's when I found that this area was all cracked and broken, and literally what was happening, the whole back of the car was getting unsettled over a bump and completely upsetting the back of it, how it, how it steered and everything. And that was what's causing this odd handling characteristic. So, you know, I was able to then say to Phil, look, this is what's happened, look, you know, and I showed him some photos. He said, "Oh yeah," he said, "yeah, well, that would explain it," you know, and that's why we never saw it, because it's obviously underneath the carpet and you couldn't see this, because this cracking, all where this goes, you can't see when that's all bolted on, unless you take that out for some reason, which you don't really take the back axle out unless you're doing restoration work, so you'd never find it. So that was quite illuminating, you know, it's sort of, it was quite nice to be able to explain to him what a bit, you know, to tell him what we'd found, and for him to sort of like, "Oh yeah, you know," and sort of, it was a nice thing. But he'd never come across it. But he didn't do sort of restorations on these because people weren't back then, you know, they weren't doing this type of work on them. This was a long time ago when these cars were a lot cheaper, and people wouldn't go to this extent. So I don't know about now if other people have found it that have been restoring them, or if it's, you know, but put it this way, every time I've taken one apart, it's been like that. So it's they're all like that, sir, as they would say in the motor trade. But there we go. Right, so this is the other side where these mount through here, these bolt holes, and this is the area that's sort of supposed to reinforce this. And again, as I say, this is a 2.4 thing, because all this floor area is different, because of course the 2 litres have cart springs. So, and this is where I mean, this car I'm talking about is all split through there, the whole lot. So all this was all flexing every time, and it was all moving around. So it was completely split right through here, right through there. They had to do extensive work to beef it up, and it'd been like it for years. But of course, because it was all sound deadening and carpet over it, you'd never know. You know, you didn't know, and that's why no one had ever discovered it. But it certainly did mess it up. But yeah, there we are. So that's that. And in fact, actually, a silly little comment, but in the publicity stuff of the time, they talk about the Fiat Dinos and the Fiat 130 having what they call passive rear steer. And now I don't know if that's a marketing way of explaining that the back end gets all loose and the bushes wear out. I don't know what it means, but yeah, I thought, oh yeah, passive rear wheel steer, I think that means the back axle falls out because all this splits, doesn't it? But anyway, there we go. But yeah, I shouldn't be so rude about them, should I? But there we are. Yeah. So there we are, we're back level again, and there you go, that's where we took that out, wasn't it, from there, and that was all what we were doing, you know, before. So we've got all this stuff in here to deal with, which is what I'm talking about. So when I say about taking that panel off, it's got a fold here, goes up there, folds in and then folds up again there, you see. So that is one panel. That could be deconstructed and taken off of there. And it's all been welded up here anyway, so I've got to deal with all that, and we've got to deal with all that. So, as I say, I haven't decided what I'll do or how I'll do, but I will be doing quite a lot of work in here, and then we can sort the tail of that, you know, chassis rail out where it goes into here, because that all sort of goes in here, and then those are all part of it, where these bolts go through for the steering idler. They all pass through some sleeves that are a part of that tail of that chassis, as it were, and there's loads of work in here, but anyway, we'll get into that later on. But here's where we've been deconstructing this A posterior. Do you remember I said it was all covered over, and I said there should be an air vent coming out of here, which it would go through this panel here. There's another hole in it, and your air vent goes in there. So that's a panel that someone's let in, and that's the original FIAT stuff. Some of this is the original FIAT stuff here, and then that's a panel that someone's let in from this side, and they sort of sandwich the rust in there. And then that's original FIAT, that's the end of it. That's the end of our boxing plate. Remember we were looking at it, and I was saying about this return on the one the one I was showing that had been made earlier for a 2-litre car, effectively. I'll pick that up so you can sort of see it properly. You know, you don't normally see this stuff unless you're amongst them like this, because you wouldn't. So yeah, you see that shape there is that shape there. You see? That bit there is in there. So that's what we're dealing with. Then that goes down behind here. Then this panel joins onto it, and then the outer sill goes over it. So that's that little lot. And all this was covered over, wasn't it? So you remember I was saying about these should have the little plates on here, and they have little retainers on them. Well, that's the remainers of the retainers there, these tangs that come over. And this whole area is then boxed in. This is boxed in with a triangulating piece, much like this, does the same job as this one. So on this one, I've cut that little plate out that they let in there, and you can see there's rust underneath it. And then you see here, this is where they welded onto it there to do that. Now I suspect I'll be deconstructing that and all this area, because there's loads to do in here, as you can see. You know, we've uncovered it all now, and we can see what we're dealing with. You know, this was all covered over, wasn't it? All this lot hidden in there. So, and then this should have, on the bottom here, it should have a little sort of strengthening piece goes in there. So as a little piece goes across there and across here. Well, you know, most people would have no idea what could go in there, but I've been amongst enough of these to know that. So I'll be dealing with that. But yeah, so there's an awful lot to go on in here to correct these previous repairs and to correct all this rust damage. But, you know, it's all doable. It's all doable. I've got patterns. You know, I can use some of this as reference, but I've got patterns for most of the rest of it anyway. So we'll be okay. We'll be all right. So yeah. So it's really, it's not going to be long till it goes off and blasting and get cleaned up properly, and then we'll see what we've properly got, won't we? So I guess if we go down onto here and you get an idea of what we're dealing with. So here's a bit that someone's let in there on the end, and then that's that area I'm talking about that becomes the boxing plate, the one with the holes in it. So that's the top edge of it, and it joins onto here. But well, it won't join on this one because this is something someone's made, because we're replacing that as well. But at the moment I'm leaving this in because I want to keep as much strength in it as I can whilst they're manhandling it and blasting it. But if we sort of move along down here, all this lot needs replacing. And then you can see there's one of those, the beginning of one of those round holes there. And you see another one there. So you can see what I'm talking about. And then a particular thing with the difference between the 2 litre and the 2.4 is when you get along to this level here, this runs parallel, and then we get to here, and then this flares out. You see it widens up? And that's only on the 2.4s. That's because all that floor area is different on the 2.4s to enable the fitment of that FIAT 130 style axle, or well, derived axle I should say. It's not style, it is a FIAT 131. And of course this one has a limited slip diff, as do the FIAT 130 coupes, but the saloons, the FIAT 130 saloons had an open diff. And I have worked on the odd Dino that's ended up with an open diff in it, probably because they had to rob one out of a 130. I don't know the axle ratios between a 130 and a Dino. I can't remember details like that. I may be obsessive, but I'm not a total anorak. I don't remember things like that. But I'm sure it could be looked up if it was ever needed to. But yeah, so yeah, anyway, so yeah, yeah, this is all the stuff we've got to deal with. But once it's clean, it's going to not look quite as daunting. And then it's going to have to be all deconstructed and rebuilt accordingly, a little bit at a time. Yes, it will be. It will be a little bit at a time. But you know, we you know, the encouragement of just welding those tangs on the other week was quite good, wasn't it? So yeah, there's plenty to do in here, but it's what it's going to take, you know. Yeah, it's what it's going to take. And of course, what you've got to remember when you look at these things, it's all just sheet steel, isn't it? All of this is sheet steel that's folded or formed into shape, and it's all held together with little spot welds, isn't it? So that's what we're dealing with. It's not a separate chassis. You know, it literally is just this steel. So if you can get your head round, that's what they did, and you can work out that you've got to turn that sheet steel into the shapes you need that are required, and then spot weld them together in the same way, it can be done. It can be done. You know, you could deconstruct it. You could take every single spot weld out of this and remove every panel down to its core panel and rebuild from there. But I'm not going to do that because I don't think I'll live long enough to do that. It'd drive you mad, wouldn't it? But yeah, it's what they are. So yeah, so it's all doable. Although a lot of this is pressed panels, and I've got to hand form them. So there is that thing of sort of reverse engineering pressed out panels and doing them by hand, which is a lot more work than doing it on a hand built car in the first place. You know, so the Maserati stuff I do, they were handmade. There was very little that's stamped out on those, and if it was probably done on a sort of, you know, arbor press and things like that. This was all done on big proper manufacturing presses that they would have been building all the Fiat 600s and all that stuff on, you know, all the proper Fiat stuff they were doing loads of. They used them same proper industrial presses, it's proper manufacturing, which is quite mad because they only made 450 of these, didn't they? So, you know, so it's you know, going to that type of production for this low volume of cars is madness. But you know, Fiat could afford to do it. You know, it's the might of Fiat they were able to do it. But it does mean I've got to do all that, you know, hand form those things and make it look like it come out of that press, which I can do, but it's quite a lot. It's a lot more work than, you know, just recreating something that was hand done and made as a, you know, as a piece on its own. So yeah, although these were assembled by the coach builders, Pininfarina, they are stamped panels. They are all stamped out. Yeah, it's all come out that way. A lot of this architecture is borrowed from the Fiat 125, and I think some of the floor pans are similar. I don't think they're the same by any means, but a lot of it's sort of their language they were using. So you might find some panels are sort of tweaked from other things. I don't really know, to be honest. I mean, you know, they didn't reinvent the wheel when they built this. They were using things that were already sort of happening. So yeah, you know, and of course that 125 and that lived on in the larders and so on, didn't it? And the FSOs, all that sort of stuff, all that design. But I don't think there's a single panel that crosses over. You know, you might find there's the odd little thing like this that does, but I don't think so. I think it was all quite different. So yeah, that's that. And one little piece of interest that I did find within here, which I thought was funny, I'll just go and get it. Now, when you take a car apart, you always find something, and it's a little part of its provenance and history, really. So in this one, you know, what you normally expect to find is lira, but we didn't, because this is an original German car supplied new to Germany, and there we are. So 1964. This predates obviously by the car, but it predates some of the work, because on it, before I cleaned it, there was some old bits of the red paint and some of the seam sealant that was used. Now I think that was all stuff that was used when it was being one of its sort of sessions of restoration rather than the factory stuff. But I thought that's quite sweet, so I just polished it up for a bit of fun just to see what it was. Yeah, not quite a Detectoris and a Roman coin, but there we are, a bit of fun, and I'm sure the owner will be pleased to see that. Not that it will go far towards fixing it, will it, in paying for it, but there we are. Anyway, I think that's enough for tonight. Well, we did a little bit of work. We did something towards it, and we talked about it, and we can see what we're getting. So it's not far off going off for its rust removal and so on. So we'll probably have a little break from this and get on with some other projects whilst we're, in the meantime. But we'll be doing other stuff, and so there'll be other films about other projects. So you can look forward to that and watch that as well. All you Dino people can watch some other stuff. Or not if you're not interested. Anyway, that's enough of that. I'll say good night.